Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Coverings 2025. I guess it's early on a Tuesday, so I guess we can all applaud that we all woke up with the right time. Those that know me know I'm an afternoon guy. I do not show up before 8 a.m., so this is a miracle in and of itself. But we want to thank everybody for coming. Obviously, if you've never been to a Coverings event, you're in for a treat. There's so much education, so many networking opportunities that you can have at these things that it truly makes it special. So we really appreciate you guys coming in and listening to Adam and I talk a lot about our favorite thing in the world, which is porcelain slabs, besides our wives, of course. But we'll go ahead and do a little bit of an introduction. Adam, if you don't mind, sir, kind of talk about yourself.
My name's Adam Christianson. I got into the flooring world, 23 years ago or so. And with the struggles of anything in the flooring world, I always wanted to learn new things. Full turnkey flooring service. I ran across gauge porcelain at a dull tile back when it was called Slim Tech. I don't know if you ever were familiar with it, but it was a 3.5 millimeter they did, 1 meter by 3 meter panel. And I got one job out of that. That was back in 2010-11 time frame. First time I touched it, last time I touched it, I said, I will never do this again. Fast forward to, 5 years after that, and I'm at a training, and it was all gauge porcelain. And I was like, oh, the market needs this. So that's right when I dropped everything else in my arsenal from, sanding floors, traditional tile installation, all that, and then went straight to porcelain. And I've been in it for the last, 9 to 12 years of my career, and it has opened up so many different things. But porcelain itself, when I started installing it, I realized all the benefits of it. And I've gone from installer, now I'm an import distributor, and I import porcelain from Italy.
Very nice. Now, my name is Nathan Parsons. I'm based out of North Carolina, service portions of Virginia, South Carolina. If I have to, we will load up the van and drive a couple states over beyond that. Similar to Adam, I fell into this back in 2014. There's a gentleman here, Frank, from Best Tile in North Carolina, decided I needed to suffer a little bit. So he said, hey, we just bought the rights to Stone Peak here in North Carolina. Would you mind going and getting trained? So this was 2014. I had never touched a piece of tile in my life. I was a granite stone countertop guy. So I went over as the only person that had never touched anything tile with a bunch of veteran tile guys, and they asked me to get thin set out of the bucket. And I just looked at them and went, how do I do this? I had no clue. So flash forward from 2014 to now, back in January, I decided that it was time. So I went out and got my CTI. So I'm a certified tile installer through CTEF. So 1969, if you wanted to have a cool year to use as your CTI number, that is a cool year, which means I can convince my wife to let me buy an old classic car. Marketing expense. So for me, porcelain slabs, I saw in 2014, were going to be the future. It was just a matter of waiting for the market to mature. So I have failed a lot. Probably like Adam, I would agree that we had nobody to call. We had nobody to talk to. It was learned through your own endeavors. And so there have been thousands of slabs that I've broken, thousands of expenses that were incurred, and a lot of hard lessons. But we're going to go and talk about some things that I know you guys have been just waiting to learn about here at Coverings. The fall of ancient Babylon. So 2,600 years ago, the city of Babylon was the U.S. of the time. It was just massive. It was the powerhouse. It defeated Egypt. It took over Jerusalem. It was the place to go if you were in any form of business. It had massive walls. It was built right on the side of the Euphrates River. But they did not pay attention to the signs of their market. They were defeated. Cyrus, the king of Persia, came by, knocked out their army, and then walked into the city. They left the gates open, but the key thing that he did is he diverted the river Euphrates. That was the key defensive thing that they had built their city around. He diverted the river, and his armies walked in through the riverbed. Now think about that. If you are sitting there at this city as a guard on top of the largest wall on the inside of the city, and you know that the river is one of your main defenses, and you notice that the river is dropping, would you not raise an alarm? I would think you would. Now, ancient history that we can learn through different resources, including the Bible, says that they were having the time of their life, having a party that night, and the army came in and it killed the king right on the spot. But we want to look at the fall of Babylon and understand, how does it affect your tile business? What are the changes that you are seeing in your market, the river that's coming through bringing you business? So let's see, what are some things that we need to think about as we're looking? Well, we know that there's going to be changes in designs and theories, things that designers really like to work with, that there's different looks, different colors. But we need to be able to take our business and adapt to those changes in the design community. We also need to look and see, how can we diversify our business? Whether we are a tile installer or perhaps we're a granite shop. We have to figure out, how do I bring in something that's new to keep us at the forefront of the business world? And if you think that there's an opportunity in your market, and that's a word that really has no synonym, opportunity, seek the work out. Go out there and find it. If you think you want to get into porcelain slabs like Adam did back in 2015-ish, right? Mm-hmm. Go find it. In 2014, I was able to sell my first job a month after coming back from Tennessee. And we built it. We failed a lot, but we built that workload. So things that we can consider right now, things that you are going to notice when you're out on the floor here at Coverings. Tile is going larger. It is not going smaller. It's hardly ever, I would think, that people are dealing with 4x4s or 6x6s anymore. They want the 2 foot by 4 foot. They want the 36 by 36. They want the porcelain slabs. And since 2022, there is definitive data that shows that there was a huge increase coming out of COVID for porcelain slab imports. If you're in the stone world, I am sure most of your suppliers in town now have their own private label, private brand porcelain slab available. So I'm from the stone shop industry, as we talked about, and one of the biggest things that you will find going on in the stone world is the rise of silica and silicosis lawsuits. There's a huge awareness for people out there about what happens when they dry cut quartz. Well, because of that, again, this is a key word here, we're going to talk about opportunity. You have the opportunity to come to the market with porcelain slabs as an alternative. It's safer for your people, it's safer for your crews, and your customers are going to know about this sooner or later. It's been in the news. It's not anything that's new. It's been there already for a while. And competitively, the manufacturers, one of the things that they don't quite discuss a lot is that they have better margins manufacturing porcelain than they do manufacturing quartz. So that's why you're going to see a lot more of these manufacturers pushing these products, because they know they can make more money doing it. So Adam, what would be the definition for porcelain slabs as you see it?
Porcelain slab, there's a book answer to this, and then there's the unofficial version. Book answer is a porcelain slab tile is 39 by 39 inches in a thickness anywhere from 3.5 millimeter, 3 plus, all the way up to 6.5 millimeter. It's gauged. That's the main term. So that's gauged material. So that's the porcelain slab tiles. Then you got porcelain slabs, which get into the 1 meter by 3 meter. Common manufacturers cross-fill with that size. They go from a 3 plus to a 5.6 millimeter. And then you got other brands that have brought in slabs. Now, gauge porcelain slabs, in my term, is 63 by 126 in that 6.5 millimeter. Now, there's manufacturers out there that have an 8 millimeter. Everyone has a 12 millimeter and 20 millimeter. Now, that's where it's outside of the tile world and it gets into that fabrication. So it's really, your 8 millimeter and 12 millimeter should still be installed like we're installing the thinner stuff. No one's going to hang 20 millimeter on the walls. I mean, there's companies out there that do it, but they're also installing that incorrectly. So with the way that porcelain slabs also are, is it's a recreation of other material. So your advantages is less water absorption, less grout joints, less maintenance, no sealing, and also materials are being manufactured into a look like a metal slab. Nobody would put a metal slab in their shower, because that would require a whole bunch of maintenance. So really, porcelain slabs, the definition is, in layman's terms, it's a really big tile, but it's still a slab.
Yeah.
I mean,
mm-hmm. Now, where would you find, Adam, at least in some of your distributing and your sales background, where have you find it best use for porcelain slabs and projects?
Oh, I mean, your countertops, your fireplaces, your showers, and your leading reasons why is countertops heat resistance. You can't put a hot boiling water on a quartz countertop. If you do, you'll start melting it, right? So porcelain in the kitchen, 100% durable. in your showers, just because of the large format and the lessened of grout joints. You're still gonna have grout joints depending on how big your shower is, right? Yeah. So if you have a 12-foot long shower, you're gonna have a couple vertical joints or horizontal joints, but you would in traditional slab material. Other places that we've seen is exterior wise, you can use it to where weather doesn't affect it like it does natural stone or other natural materials, or a material like quartz, which can't be out there.
Yeah.
So,
do we have any stone fabricators in the audience this morning? Okay, very good. So this is a term I just heard for the first time. I guess it's from the bougie world, but their summer kitchen, right? Their outdoor kitchen area. You can't use quartz, as Adam said, because they're not UV stable. So porcelain, substitute. So that way the customer doesn't have to worry about the absorption if they want natural stone. So it's definitely like a huge advantage for design purposes that you can go anywhere and anywhere that's flat. Now, something though that Adam and I have talked about a few times is that in order to be a successful porcelain slab installer, you need to be all of these three things that are on the screen. Right, and of course, me being me, we have to have a pun here. Then you realize you need to learn more, a Venn diagram. But definitely the tile, the stone, and glass, that center section. You need to have the tile background because you're going to have to mix thin sets. You're going to have to prep a job site. You have to waterproof. You have to have the stone background because of the equipment, because of how you're going to handle such large things. Do you have the correct vehicle to transport these slabs? And then glass, the glass background is because a lot of our tooling from a handling standpoint does come from the glass industry. A lot of our suction cups come from glass. More importantly, this stuff, if you bend it, it's going to snap like glass. It's going to be a very sharp item. So definitely kind of keep that in mind as you are learning about porcelain and you dive into it. You're going to have to pull from different shows. Now, one of your contacts there, Craig, he was at a glass show in Atlanta last year. Guess who else was at the glass show in Atlanta? Myself. And out of like 500 feet away, we both saw each other and screamed and hollered like little teenage girls at each other. And we ran to give each other hugs and danced around in circle. But that was just because we understood that we were the oddballs out in that area. That none of these glass guys had ever heard of porcelain, but yet here we were, two porcelain slab guys looking around trying to find the next thing that we could use. So let's talk though next here about creative applications beyond just flooring. So Adam, if you could talk about this photo that you provided for us this morning.
So this is actually my showroom in Kansas City. Partnership with Schluter, they're a hard believer in education, and so am I. And it goes hand in hand with a company that we had once called Tile Nation. Always trying to be innovative with training, and one of the biggest pitfalls with porcelain was that. So as a distributor, I put on, try to put on quarterly training events outside of the normal of stick a slab on the floor and the wall. This one in particular, we went over miters. It was about 2.5 days. And the desk there, it's one of those furniture pieces where we use porcelain beyond our normal scope. The construction of that desk is out of 2-inch foam board, double layers, and cladded directly, the porcelain directly to that. We did miter joints. We were able to teach that, color match silicone or epoxy. But overall, this installation, it went pretty good and fast. And the planning for it was, it was kind of in the design. Adding the lights to it is another effect that kind of gives that room just a different ambiance.
Yeah, the LEDs are pretty cool.
Yeah, so I mean, you're able to do some things. Had a fabricator water jet out the Schluter trapezoids in the floor. It was one of those things, having that relationship with the stone fabricators as a tile installer background, we're able to use their technology to our advantage.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. We got this job, and I am going to point out that this was a one-man, one-woman install. So if there are any ladies in the crowd, you can install porcelain slabs. You might have a very aggressive husband yelling at you while you're doing it, but you can install porcelain slabs. Actually, my wife ended up coming out and helping me on this. We rented one of those lifters. I don't know if you've ever played with those, the vacuum lifters, the automatic. There's a couple brands you'll probably see on the floor. There's, well, I won't name drop any of the brands that are out there, but these are machines that grab onto porcelain slabs for you, and you can lift them, move them, go all around. So this was a 12 mil material that we used on the walls for this office space. In front of this desk is actually a 16-foot fireplace that was mitered and returned. But I think what's nice about working with these slabs is that you can really take a traditionally bland apartment complex and make them wow. You can really make some unique statements with it. It really does turn out. And especially too, with the differences of patterns that are available, book match versus vein match versus random face, this being a book match pattern, you don't get a look unlike it, right? It's just something very, very special to it. Now, I'm sorry, go for it.
No, something about that book match too, and it's one of those things, guys. Like you can deliver a design expectation off the bat, like to where natural stone. If you do book match with natural stone, you'll have a variation in your book match. And in the design world, having the ability to have replicatable slabs, your design team can give a basic perfect rendering of what the job will represent once it's completed. So it helps sell that job too.
Now, obviously, with types of wall cladding that's out there, showers. I mean, showers is just seemingly the thing that we're getting called on the most in North Carolina. The fact that we are having, right now, I think we have a queue backlog of close to 10 showers that people want to have done. But with this particular customer, he wanted very clean, aesthetic, very European, and so that's what we were able to deliver with some, I believe it was Neolith at the time. But just again, you're finding uses of porcelain slabs where normally you would have all these grout lines. In that shower, there's only one joint that we have to worry about for maintenance for that homeowner. So it definitely comes in handy. Moving along too, as we were talking about earlier, if you were to put some other materials on the exterior of a building, they're going to have extreme maintenance. But with some of the restaurants that are out there and businesses, they are going to exterior facades. Now with facades, there are some rules you've got to follow. If you're doing direct bond, make sure that you get your local rep involved right away so that you understand what they would require to have a successful installation with their thin set mortars. You're going to have to think about temperatures. You're going to have to think about what's going to happen. So like on this particular project, we knew that the temperature was going to drop below 40 degrees in 24 hours. So we actually had to cancel the install to allow that cold snap to go through so that we did not have anything fail on us, because I would hate for somebody to have a piece of towel come on their head after they just had a ton of flank steak. Just would not be a nice night for them. Now, Adam, let's talk a little bit about countertops. We saw the display you had in your place, but vanities. What do you see a lot of times with those?
So with vanities, porcelain is so versatile, right? So we can use it to create our tops, clatter cabinets. The slide that's up now is a product we did out of a 4mm deck tin. And the designer literally said, hey, there's going to be a hanging cabinet. We want it covered in porcelain. And it was one of those things, we were working with a wood substrate on the doors, so we had to figure out an adhesive for that. So it was one of those things like, what adhesive do we use? I actually ended up using a wood floor adhesive to attach those to it. At the time, I didn't have Basti set at my disposal. The countertop was, again, constructed out of a foam board, and a vessel sink sits on top of it. So they gave me a picture and inspiration and said, build this.
Nice. And that's kind of a similar look here on the second slide that you've got, I believe, right? Just with that vessel sink design?
Yeah, that vessel sink design, built a platform for it. Again, this is 4mm decked in, but we're using the thinner stuff to build all our furniture pieces and vanity tops and things of this nature.
Now, one of the concepts that I know has been discussed a lot that I hear from like the stone shop world is the minimum thickness allowed for countertops. Is there any rule that you tend to follow on that?
So typically we try to stay to 12mm. Now, if you notice, I said furniture pieces. So I built furniture pieces out of 3 plus all the way up to 20mm. It's depending on the application. It's also dependent on the substrate and the adhesives that you're using. Not all adhesives and substrates are created equal. So by the time you put that right combination together, you can have a desired outcome rather than the 12s and 20s and 8s. And this allows a tile guy like me, without machines, to build the same thing the fabricators are building at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, I think something he hit on too is you had mentioned you had to figure out what was the right adhesive. You know, here, if you guys are going to steal a sales line, this is the one I'm going to give you here. So there's a difference between when you order a BLT sandwich at the restaurant and a grilled cheese. And I'm not saying that because I'm an overweight guy. I'm just saying this is a good analogy. A BLT sandwich, you can pull the lettuce out if you don't like it. You can pull the tomato out, no problem. A grilled cheese, if you don't like the cheese in it, can you get it out from the bread? No, you can't. It's permanently affixed. And that's the goal when you're assembling something like a vanity, a countertop. It needs to be permanently affixed. So you have to have the right substrate, you have to have the right bonding adhesive, you've got to assemble it, and you have to make sure that it has properly collapsed and bonded. So don't have a BLT, make sure that your team is manufacturing the grilled cheese. And that's where, like with this next photo, with this kitchen countertop project, same thing. You've got to be able to have everything kind of thought out beforehand. So what I loved about this kitchen that we did in Texas, everything was hand fabricated, scored and snapped. We hand mitered everything, but every corner book matches to each other. So if you follow a vein, it will go down and around a corner, and then it will follow its mirror self back underneath. What was also interesting is that if you notice in the background there's a farm sink. We told the builder and manufactured it this way that it needed to have joints in the corners because of stresses. They wanted to have a mitered edge. So we installed it that way. Builder comes in the following day, calls our general manager, says, hey, I don't like the look, I want it redone so there's just one seam in the back of the sink. We told the manager that's a bad idea. They went ahead and did it. Not even 6 days later, do you want to take a guess what happened?
Correct.
Cracked right in the corner. So they had to send out the repair technician to go ahead and basically cut out that middle area, put the joints where they were originally. So, waste of product, waste of time, when the idea there is alleviate stress and problems. Now, Adam, you sent me this photo, and I thought it was pretty cool. Do you mind kind of telling us what it was and what was the thought process?
So there's inspiration behind this. It was one of those things I always tell people, if you can dream it or build it out of stone, I can build it out of porcelain. Somebody sent me a picture, said, hey, can you do curves? And I said, well, let's figure that out. I saw a guy in Europe, it was one of those, I saw a guy in Europe do it, and I'm going to try it myself. And I cut 3/4 inch strips. Again, went to a foam substrate, used Schluter V board, which it's a board that can bend, so I was able to make my contour. And just built an overall design, and it's used in our showroom as a serving bar for parties. But it's just an example of what you can do with porcelain outside of the normal when you just have a free range of thinking and, I don't know, time and tools on your hand, I guess. But the idea is to showcase that if you can do it out of stone, we can do it out of porcelain.
I think too, you went to KBIS, I believe, earlier.
Yeah.
I think too, there's some brands that are now saying that their slabs can be somewhat bendable.
Yeah, so the manufacturer at Import Infinity, they worked with a company in Italy to thermal form porcelain. So just like quartz, you can thermal form quartz at, I think, 200 some degrees. You can start bending it and make it into different shapes. Well, porcelain is manufactured very much like glass. So we go back to that glass world of his Venn diagram, and glass can be bent, architectural glass can be bent over forms in kilns. So if it's manufactured the same, can they do this the same? And there's a company that figured that out, and bending porcelain and getting it right now is really expensive. I think the shower display that you may be referring to retails like $14,000 for the 2 slabs, but it's bent porcelain.
Do they accept checks?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's one of those things like you're gonna have to plan way ahead to do that if you want bent porcelain, but
Yep.
it's coming.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of a neat look. And then we get to things like furniture and custom pieces. This photo here, we had a gentleman in Charlotte that had a marbled art base, and he said, I want something to duplicate this. Kind of threw it on us at the last second after we had just installed his fireplace that you'll see later. So we ran over to our friends at Best Tile. They just so happened to have this color from Stone Peak that looked just like what this gentleman had from the natural tile world. And so he said yes, and we built it for him. It was quick, $2,000 and barely $100 of product involved. So it was really neat to be able to provide that for him quickly. But you sent me, Adam, this next photo that I thought was really cool, because I like abstract looking things. Describe.
Yeah, so it's one of those things, my business partner and I, we challenge each other. And this was one of those things, we saw something. It was one of those, like you see a piece in natural stone or anything, and he's like, I'm gonna build that out of porcelain. And I said, have fun. But the thing is, again, going back to book match or vein wraps, the veins wrap all the way around that. If we had a close-up of the white veins to the black veins, he even went in and color matched the epoxy through the veins through using a cork miter. But the idea was to just build different things. We built in flower vases, we've done a couple round ones where we've cut the pieces around small, but the idea was just to give you something that you could set on your table and set stuff on. More dust collectors that we need, right?
Well, one thing too to think about, guys, is that the way that we, or at least for our team here, the way we've learned so many of our little techniques was just playing around. Oh, I have this idea, let me go play and figure it out. So like years ago, I built a chessboard out of porcelain. That gave me more insight into understanding like how things would be placed, how things would react to each other, than some of the showers we had done. So we had a project where I had an inordinate amount of material left over from one of the main brands that are out there. So we started playing around with furniture pieces. So we were able to kind of create this tabletop, just using some Schluter profiles, just because we wanted to practice using Schluter profiles. But it's stable. It's handy. It looks good. It's kind of a unique approach on having a standard tile in the room. Now, if, again, countertop guys, you have seen probably some of the wireless phone chargers that are available on the market. I'm sure you've seen that. Why not try to implement hiding some of those wireless chargers in these furniture pieces that you develop? That's what we were able to do with this next piece. That's an end table for a couch. Connect a little RFI charger underneath and you're ready to roll. So again, it's just trying to find different abstract ways. And if you think about the hospitality industry, they want the same thing 100 times, or if you're in one of these larger hotels, 1,200 times. How are they going to get the exact same look out of natural stone? They're only able to get maybe some of the more basic patterns that can be replicated, or the quartz countertops that can be replicated. Now with porcelain, if they want a very specific look, you can get it 1,200 times, 2,000 times, 5,000 times, or let's say they want to go across the whole country with it. Like, you kind of get that sales idea here that you get to control the product a lot more. But going back towards some of the residential approaches, fireplaces and statement walls. It seems like so many of the clients that have a little bit more coin in their pocket, they want to have something that's very unique to them. They want to have just this statement. So the gentleman earlier that we talked about that had the furniture art piece, this was his fireplace. He wanted to have just a very cool look, and he has some really nice style. I will admit, this is probably one of the clients I've had that I'm walking through his home, snapping it for my own personal Pinterest file for what I want to do at the house. But just a nice fireplace. And even this next photo, up in the mountains of North Carolina, using some neolith material. We had to basically go, I think it was about 15 feet up and notch around their planks, 12 millimeter material. But a key consideration on something like this with such a visual pattern is we also had to be cognizant of their wood fire-burning fireplace. We put lateral joints out of the corners. It's something that we have found is the most reliable way to make sure we don't have to replace anything, is that thermal expansion. How do we eliminate it? We put joints out of the corners. We don't want to come back in 6 months because something heated up too much, somebody got crazy while they were drinking late at night and it just popped. We don't want to deal with that headache. So I don't know if you've run into any issues.
So on fireplaces, there's some things, and those joints, 90% of the fireplaces out there, we recommend those joints. Fireplaces where we see joints not really needed is when somebody buys one of those electric fireplaces that puts out no heat. It's one of those slip-in ones. You can do an extremely large radius usually in your corners and insert that firebox, and the trim covers that. I've had some customers where they've said, we don't want joints, and I said, well, if it cracks, we've had the conversation. But some of those fireplaces that have really big, what is it, the trim rings, right?
Yeah.
And they're low BTU. Some fireplaces you can, but it also, you gotta have a conversation with your customer. How often are you gonna use it? I have a customer that said, well, we put a $70,000 fireplace in it, and 4 years later, they've never turned it on.
Yep.
So sometimes it's just a look or a statement piece for somebody. So we address those customers' concerns off the rip, but 90% of those fireplaces going with seams, seeing different failures over the years. I mean, it's just, we've learned.
Well, what would you say for the audience here would be the smartest thing if a customer does want to have just a singular unit to make sure that when you do that cutout, it doesn't splinter out? What would you do as control for that?
If we're not putting seams in?
Correct, yeah.
Oh, it would have to have a bezel, and we drill 1 3/8 holes in every corner, so that radius maintains. It goes back to thinking of the egg, right? we've all tried to squish an egg in our hand, but you can't because that force just goes around. So having that larger radius is like an egg. So as that thermal expansion goes back and forth, it's taking that stress off of that. So you're never going to have a 90-degree corner in porcelain, ever.
What would you say for your team there's been some like the tallest fireplaces you guys have had to do?
Oh, we've hit 37, 40 feet in a house. So, I mean, there's one right now that we're consulting on where there's 3 fireplaces in the singular stack. So they have a fireplace down here in the living room, second floor, there's a fireplace in the next living room, and the master bedroom, which has glass walls. So the whole thing will book match from floor to ceiling, which again, having book match material allows for that desired outcome of it all matching. So that one's gonna be pretty spectacular because it's 52 feet tall.
Now, do you guys have a lot of logistical planning about where you're going to approach it, how you're going to scaffold and all that stuff?
Oh, there's times where, you know, we would stop construction framing rough in to be able to get porcelain into places. Once you start putting railings up and different walls, you know, getting to that top floor, getting up might be a conversation piece for you and the builder, or you have to figure out different ways. We've done some walls and fireplaces where we'll take a wireless winch and attach it to the 2x12 ceiling and winch it up there just using our regular suction cup frame. We've come up with some creative ideas.
That, by the way, is one of my favorite tricks that we've, I think, mutually kind of discovered is using a winch instead of hand carrying with 6 guys up a scaffold. You just hook it and go. Like, it's so much nicer in that sense. Your back thanks you later on that evening, for sure. Now, something that my crew got stuck on last summer was this bath wash for a dog. So not only did they do the bath zone, they did all up the wall there, as well as wainscoting throughout the room. This was part of a $14 million house. And with all the other things that they did in this room, I would imagine it was probably somewhere around $75,000 total. We were just brought in as the install labor for this whole house. But that dog bath, I don't know what type of dog it was, but that shower is good enough for me after an install day. So it was nice. And you notice too at the bottom in the cabinet, I just actually had another client ask me about this. Put in it for a little dog bowl food area so that when they make a hot mess eating their slop, you know, it doesn't have to stain a wall or anything. It's a nice clean zone. Now, we kind of hit on it a little bit earlier with the facade work, but in commercial and hospitality, porcelain is very, very popular. The trouble that you will find is that there's a vast difference, as Adam and I have talked about before, vast difference between residential rates and commercial rates. Big difference. So with some of the commercial work, you're going to have to sharpen up that pencil and figure out how you can be more efficient and more cost effective, and how fast you can get it done while still ensuring accuracy and quality. Now on this particular project, we scored and stamped everything out in the garage. You notice the thought process that we had was, how can I make the veins connect even if it's a wall that I'm not near, just so that it can continue to go. So this was during the installation part that you see this photo on the left, followed up by the section to the right. That's the, what do they call it? The ink dot test here for folks to see really what their mind is like. So again, it's just kind of neat. Now, keep in mind, if you're doing commercial work too, you got to have PPE. You have to have a lot of written paperwork prepared for dust control. There's a lot of different rules that you may have to follow based off of what that builder is going to require of you. And you better have a good pocketbook because they may string you out for 6 months to a year for payment, depending on what state you're in. Now, this is not a photo by Adam nor I, but I think it's Weaverstone, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Is there anybody here from Weaverstone? Good, I can steal your photo. This desk, I saw this on social media and I said, that is wicked cool. They're using Decton material on this, just with a really nice profile, but it's a floating desk. Like if you stand back from certain angles, you're not going to notice that it's even locked into the ground. Why can you do that with porcelain? Because it's much, 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 much lighter than natural stone. But just wicked cool design that they had on this. Now, obviously, these are some jobs that we've had in the past, but we really wanted to talk about a couple that were more finite and detailed. So, Adam, if you don't mind, talk about this wash basin, this bathtub.
So this was a collaborative idea. To give background on it, me and Christopher Rachel, Superior Home Solutions, we had a company, Tile Nation, and we were at Coverings 3 years ago, And someone said, have you ever built a bathtub out of porcelain? We said no. Schluter had a whole bunch of foam board they gave us, and we started constructing what we thought would be a bathtub. And we didn't get it completely built at Coverings. Chris took it back to his mad science lab in Nebraska, and he had a client walk in and said, I want a porcelain bathtub. Guy's 6'7", had 2 knee replacements. So this guy wanted a therapy tub is what he wanted. He wanted something he could soak his whole body in. So when Chris took this back, he met with that client. They started going over the build. And of course, they don't make drains for porcelain bathtubs. So the idea was, how do you fix that? Chris found a drain from Kohler that he was able to adapt into the foam board and properly waterproof. He also installed heat in the bottom of this and the back of it. The guy had both knees replaced. So again, what this was a custom built bathtub for somebody for medical specific need. And that guy uses it daily, if I'm not mistaken, and it's therapy. So the idea was to give somebody something you couldn't buy from the store, and that's what was created.
Yeah, and I think that's what's neat about this section that we're talking about is that it's creative ideas. It's things that are outside the norm for most of our other surfaces that we would work with, whether it's a tile company or a stone shop. I mean, that's a cool concept that I think can easily be duplicated, but you have to think it through. And I think that's what you guys did a great job thinking it through. On my side of things, we had an idea. We had some cheap slabs. Why don't we do a gate with a planter on top that's lighted instead of your atypical wood gate? So that's what, excuse me guys, I'm sorry about that. So planning wise, we had to figure out how can the wall be strong enough for exterior, what waterproofing agents should we use, when should we run the wires, and then more importantly, with the dirt that's on top for the planter, how do you drain it out properly if it gets overwhelmed with rain or flooded, if there's a hurricane that comes through in North Carolina. So we had to kind of think all those logistical things through before we could even start cutting the first slab of material. Now, what's not shown just yet, because it's still in the planning stages, is there's actually going to be a swing part of this for an actual gate. So from the street, all you see is just porcelain slabs next to the house, and where does the driveway go? So a nice proper block off. Now, the next thing we're going to have is to build a watchtower. Again, learning from ancient Babylon, I want to have the archers on top of there to protect the house when I'm not home. But we'll get to that later. Now, Adam, you had another unique project that you had sent over that's simple, but it again shows the durability of creativity.
Yeah, so this is my personal house, and of course, when we bought this house, I had a lot of porcelain sitting there that I bought for our previous house, and we came across the deal. So our whole bathroom is done in porcelain, and I had leftover scraps. And what do you do with scraps? You know, like stone fabricators, they have the remnant pile. Well, I'll tell you what, having remnants of porcelain, I throw out more than we keep now, just because you just can't store it all, and you don't want to be wasteful. So the wife actually sent me an inspiration picture for our bedroom, and the lights and everything. Like, I started getting ideas, and I took my love for woodworking and mixed it into porcelain too. So the night table is live edge walnut. That simply is just mitered in the corner. It book matches, so bringing the book match of what we do in porcelain to wood, and then the top of the nightstand is a 6mm porcelain over foam board. And like Nathan brought up earlier, the QI chargers, both of our nightstands on both sides of our bed have QI chargers. So we have less wires, we just set our phone down, instantly starts charging. That, at the time, it was one of those things, nobody had a really good one out there, so I relied on Amazon through 15 different chargers. I finally found one that worked. And then the light fixtures, it was again one of those things, like it had dangly lights and inspiration picture, and went to Amazon and different hardware stores and just started creating, and now we have that. And in our kitchen we have an island light that will match our countertops. So it's just the versatility of how you can take design elements from other rooms and build furniture pieces and custom pieces to just tie the whole element together.
Well, one of the things too why I wanted to include this in the presentation, Adam, is that you are hitting a couple different areas here with the piece on the ceiling matching the actual nightstand, but the element that I think we can all think about is that this is a lightweight material. The substrate is also lightweight. So what would stop you from getting an actual light unit, a recessed light unit, and building a floating slab in your showroom that is also your lighting device? I don't know how the electrical code would work for it, but the concept is there. Something that's lightweight, you hoist up, you hook on some cables.
So you're thinking like a cloud like you'd see. So
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. See, and I got a 40-foot ceiling in our building that we bought for our showroom, so this is already milling in my head trying to figure it out.
If you put sound foam on the backside, it helps redirect sound.
There you go.
So.
Yeah. All right, so now let's get into some horror, I gotta make sure I always say that word right, situations. All right, so these are gonna be some nasty photos, and I do apologize if anybody has a weak stomach, if anybody gets queasy, okay? But just because you think you can doesn't mean you should. All right, this guy was very proud of the fact that he went to a certain distributor in California. He made his custom A-frame with 4 2x4s, and they hand-loaded with no suction cups, no PPE, no safety devices, and he thought he was going to get to the job site A-OK with these slabs. Now, thankfully, because his posts are in Spanish, and I have a thing called Google, I can translate what he's talking about, but his jobs did not go very smoothly, and he learned some very expensive mistakes. At the same time, we have this gentleman. Just because you have 50,000 followers doesn't mean you can hack the process for your client. So getting up on a ladder, and if you notice, he's on the very top part of the ladder. So again, safety first, folks. But you can't just liquid nail these porcelain slabs into place just because you think you can. Right? You have been hired as the professional. There is methodology to what we are doing here. We want to have these pieces bonded permanently so that they don't fall over in 2 years as your house moves.
But aren't most of their excuses, it's 12 millimeters, so we do what we want?
Well, I would think 20 millimeters, more safe to use liquid nail, much heavier and more durable.
Yeah.
Sarcasm induced. Now, I am going to fall on the sword here with a mea culpa. A friend of mine had an emergency for a job. So just because you walk into a fire drill project to install does not mean you should ignore problems and issues. So this actually just happened to me. Again, I've been doing this 11 years. There are moments where we are still caught with our pants down, as it were, to use another cliche. This triple desk, we showed up. Slabs weren't even on site. We had to wait 2 days for the slabs to show up. They had given the original tile contractor all of 2 weeks' notice for a job he quoted 2 years ago. And so when we showed up, everybody was already antsy. They said, get to it. Well, we put our level on it, and we said, this thing is 3/8 of an inch out of level, and it's not even plumb, it's all out of whack. Doesn't matter, go for it. So we started to install. They said, do it. Well, what we should have done is stop, pump the brakes, called my buddy, him called the GC, who then calls the client to get the carpenter back out there to fix everything. Turns out, after this $10,000 desk has now been demolished and redone, the electricians had moved the table 4 times, and nobody knew. It was not even centered in the room. It was out of square with the room. So as we were cladding everything, and we just knocked out the vein matching, because that's my calling card, this thing was jacked up. There were spots where we were having to kind of contort pieces to get the lippage to work, but it just wasn't right. So what is the lesson I want you to take away from our failure as a team? If there is something you find when you get on site that does not meet code, stomp your feet, lock yourself down, chain yourself around the bulldozer, make them fix it, or get them to pay you to fix it. Because we wasted 2.5 weeks on this project with this area and another area, all for naught. It had to be redone. We had to give money back because we were liable for not holding the line. So what was a point of trying to help out a friend ended up having a negative effect. I'm still friends with him, love the guy, but it just, you know, it's one of those things that we should have known better to call the right people to have them fix their stuff. So Adam, if you can talk a little bit about planning and logistics when it comes to your job sites.
Planning logistics, I like to do, a job walk from the first talks about gauge porcelain, and that's, if it's new construction, it's stick framed. Like as soon as it's stick framed, let's walk it. But we're gonna teach our builders everything about what we want to do. So if we're installing on the 3rd floor, we're gonna figure out how to get the porcelain up there. If we're doing outside, we want to make sure it's the right time of year. We don't want to be doing it when there's snow. We don't want to be doing it when it's 90 degrees. And then also planning for working around other trades. Like if you're doing floors, you can't have the electricians and the plumbers on the job site. You own that job site from when you start prep. So that's the talks that we have with those contractors. Like, We tried not to do anything on the job sites anymore. Everything's done off-site from, we go template, if it's digital or stick, and take it back to the shop, cut everything, take it back and install it. It lessens our footprint and lessens the oops that could happen. So that's, between your logistics, how are you going to get it there? How are you going to get it to where you're getting it installed? Making sure you own the job site, and then making sure everything's within that spec. Hold that line. Don't learn from his mistake and my mistakes. We've all been pressured into a job where, hey, get it done, get it done, get it done, and ultimately cost us. If a job takes a week longer, but the job lasts 100 years, it's better that happens rather than, oh, I got out of there in 3 days, made a whole bunch of money, and now I'm down the road and I get a call 6 days later, hey, something broke. It happens. I want it only to break when somebody runs a car into it, So that's where we're gonna go with it.
Do we have any salespeople in the room today? See a couple in the back light, okay. I love salespeople. Salespeople, it is so easy. Kidding, of course, right? But keep this in mind, not every client deserves slabs, right? Mm-hmm. Some people it's not in their wheelhouse. They may not understand what they're actually asking for. But at the same time, not every manufacturer is gonna send you leads, and not every supplier is just gonna give you swag because you ask for it. I know as tile guys, that's mostly what I'm here for, is just the free t-shirts. But it's just the same though, you may not be the right fit for every job. There are some projects that I get called on that I know it's outside of my wheelhouse, scale, whatever. But those are the things that you gotta be kind of cognizant as you are selling the project, as you are managing the project, is just those things. Now, on the inverse, if you build a reputation for your process and abilities as a team, the reliable suppliers will support your logistics. That's why they answered my call when I put it in, and I'm sure Bostic answers your call when you've got a question. The right clients, they will seek you out, and the respectable manufacturers in your areas. The ones that you really, really do want to work with, they will recommend your name. But it's only after you've really established your reputation as being thoughtful, as being able to handle the projects that you send out there. Now, Adam, we mentioned a little earlier that you now take some of your pieces off-site, that you're not a large stone shop, but describe, I guess, a little bit of that difference of the bespoke process that you guys have.
It's one of those processes we came up with, again, where we're pioneering into something that's new. So in the tile world, you got to figure things out. I had a job where the homeowner hired me in the parking lot of Doll Tile. He got a list of recommended installers. We were at the top of the list, and it just so happened like we passed each other, and he was out there waiting. And he said, "Hey, we got this porcelain project. I really want porcelain." And I was like, "Sure, let's look at it." Well, that job made me move everything offsite as far as fabrication, because we had first slab on the table, we had the customer, the builder, the designer, the wife, and the kid standing on the balcony above us. We snapped the first one, and the panel shattered. Everything was spot on. The guys, I handled it very well. The guys unloaded the slab. We had the same exact slab on the trailer that backed up the trailer. We unloaded it and then went about a different way of fabrication. But right then and there, the nerves and the anxiety that I had, I realized I had to figure something else out different. So after that job, I thought about my process, and where I had a lot of friendships with the fabricators, I was like, hey, you guys do everything off site and only make adjustments on site. So it was one of those things where I was like, I'm gonna start pulling measurements, learn different measuring techniques. Then I learned stick templating. And when I got to stick templating, it was, hey, we make a template, we're on the job site, we're gone, we come back with the piece, we look like heroes, because the other porcelain installers are doing everything on site. So in that time of our new business idea and venture, it was really just copying what the stone guys did with the manual ways. And there's stone guys out there that do it manually still. So it was then changing that. So we'd go in, do prep, get everything dialed in, make our templates, come back with porcelain. Once our prep was done and we were starting to install porcelain, most projects were turned in 2 to 3 days completed. Mm-hmm. So again, we're not tying up the job site for a week fabricating, because most job site fabs, like, it's a slower process because you're working around people. You make that template and you have that process down, you're back and forth. So unlike the fabrication industry where we template and we're back in 2 to 3 weeks, once we start templating, the project's done in 3 days. Yeah. So we go in and do prep, stick template, 3 days later your shower's done, we're all happy.
Yeah, I think like internally for us, if we're doing stuff on site, we know we average somewhere between 75 to 125 square feet, having to score and snap panels for a shower out in the driveway or wherever. But with us digitally measuring, if I have a stone shop fabricate for us and they actually follow the DXFs, we can double or triple our output. So the most we've ever been able to do having it pre-cut was I think 230 we did in one day, 8 hours. So that was a much faster pace for the team for us internally. Now those numbers might be low compared to other installers, but for what we're going after, that's what we were able to achieve. And I think that's where the production mentality you find with stone shops, does have to change. If you're thinking about implementing a lot of porcelain into your world, your machinery is not going to be as fast as you were cutting some simple basic white quartz. Or if you're cutting our world famous Ubatuba, it's not going to be as fast as that. You've got to adapt your production mentality to account for it. You've got to give your guys some room and latitude for mistakes as they learn what the equipment can or can't do. And that's where, having been in many, many different granite shops and different sizes, different equipment, each shop is going to have its own unique parameters, I guess would be the word I would use.
Yeah. I find that most fabricators, I worked with a lot of them over the U.S. implementing the manual hand fabrication. Most shops slow down 30% of their production when they touch porcelain. When porcelain goes on the table, you're shutting your shop down 30%. What does that do to your bottom line? Lessens everything 30%. You got 30% less revenue, money, everything coming in. Then you make a mistake with porcelain, now you're taking dollars out of the piggy bank. So.
Yep. If there's, obviously this show is very tile centric, right? We're here to learn about tile products out on the floor. Just a few months ago, Adam and I were both in Las Vegas for a stone expo where they had all these different machine companies. And there's going to be a few here this week, but they are now developing the machinery for this large scale production of porcelain. They realize that porcelain is the future because of what they're seeing with quartz. Quartz is no longer available in Australia. England is looking to ban it. California is incredibly strict on what you can or can't do with quartz. So the idea that porcelain is going to become a mainstay part of the market, it's clear as day to me that that's where it's going. Adam, I'm sure it's clear to you, that's why you're importing it too.
Yeah, no, that was the move to moving to import, and like we still offer the consulting and do a one-off project here and there, but there's a lot of logistical problems, and that's what we solved in our local market, was like trying to figure out how to get these installers, both fabricators and tile alike, to grasp on to the new product, the future of surface. I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah, so it's definitely coming down the pipe. The thing we would want to encourage you then this morning to think about as you head to the floor is what brands are out there that you like? What brands are there that you feel are in your area? How can you implement porcelain slabs into your business? Because if you can implement them into your business, you can then do something which is thinking beyond the floor. So with that, do we have any questions from the audience this morning? Yes, ma'am.
Repair work. So going back to that one job where the customers and everyone was watching me, went to collect a final payment on the job site with after doing an inspection with everyone. Me and the builder were walking through, and the trim carpenter shot his nail, hit a drywall screw, it horseshoed around, and blew out a silver dollar size on the front of the porcelain. And it couldn't have happened in a better spot because it was down low by the baseboard. Your eye doesn't go to it, but I instantly saw a big white void in the middle of something that was supposed to be black. And I got a repair kit out. I'd used fill a chip at the time. And filled in with black and did incremental 30-second layers because the black, to fill it up, it's a slow process. Got that filled up, and it looked just like the day we got done installing it. You know, there's a learning curve to repairs when it comes to porcelain. Both scratches can go out. At the SFA cage, I don't remember the booth, I think it might be 60, 61. They'll probably be doing a scratch demo over the next 2 days on some porcelain, but removing scratches. So
MB Stone?
Yeah, MB Stone, Cameron. Okay. There's 2 different kits out there, Scratch Off by Faber and then Surface Renew, but like porcelain is a maintained product too, so scratches are something that's gonna happen. You know, we had a customer that we consulted on, and she cooked a lot and her diamond ring was huge, and she dragged her diamond ring on a polished porcelain top. That scratches where she's going in and out of the oven. Those were almost all be able to get removed, but it went through the glazing. Once you scratch through the glazing, now repairs are becoming unlikely. But there's companies out there working diligently on those kits. You know, it's a learning curve. We didn't know how to repair quartz when it first came out. Stone, how'd we repair that? We glued it back together, epoxies, polished, you know, so all those things are being implemented and those kits are being made.
Yeah, I would say from a stone shop standpoint, even when I was managing a large fabricator there in Raleigh, we would have a rule that we'd implement is what's the cost value here? If you spend 4 hours to repair it, but then we send it out the door for the 2-hour drive and then it has to come back still, was it really worth the 4 hours you spent trying to fix it? So if you can figure out a way to quickly replace, sometimes that's the more efficient way that we think about it. Because once that customer knows that there's a stain on their white shirt, are they going to always notice the stain on that white shirt? Depends on who you're talking to. So I think the surface renew that you mentioned from MB Stone, like I've used that now once. I know I got to practice some more with it because it was to get some of those surface marks out that were in the material. It worked, but then I changed the lighting condition and I could see where the swirls were. So it's situational. Now, one of the photos we did have in the presentation was of a gentleman that had vertical shower lines. That did have damage at the bottom of one of the corners, but we were able to repair it and blend it out so that it hit that 5-foot rule. Nobody even knew that that happened. So thankfully it was like the last slab at the end of the day, no homeowner around, and I spent that hour fixing it and it blended out. Perfect, ready to move on.
And I would imagine you did that just because if you were to rip that out, you might have waterproofing issues.
Oh, heck yeah.
So-
Yeah. Plus the fact that the homeowner did not order any extra slabs out of Florida, so
Yeah.
that makes it a little bit more stressful. Yes, sir.
Do you use 3mm to wrap like some of your furniture and things like that? And if so, and you're using a thin veneer, are you trying to miter the edges or you just leave it?
Going back to that white countertop, that was a 4mm material, and then the vanity that was kind of with the vessel on it, that was another 4mm material. The 3+ and the 3.5, like you can miter it. It's just you got to be. There's no rule on mitering yet. We'll put it that way. When it comes to the thinner material, there's no written rule on it. So we're still in that no man's land. That's where I like a cork miter. Nathan, you like a harder miter where you glue it up tight, porcelain on porcelain. But that open cork miter on that 3.5mm, what it's doing is it's open, and that epoxy takes the blunt, trauma of any kind of impact to where it's not hitting that porcelain.
Yeah, so that was my main question. If you've got a 3mm and you are trying to hard miter it, doesn't those edges get so sharp that it almost needs to be polished in some way?
Well, yeah, all porcelain and porcelain manufacturers, when you're creating a miter for countertops, they actually, in their fabrication, they require you to round over that edge, and then you're exposing body of porcelain and taking away that glazing. So that's where a hard miter and a cork miter is different.
Yeah. Now, I think you're from Ohio, is it, sir?
That's right.
Okay, if anybody's from Ohio, please come see our buddy up here.
So, piggybacking off his question, when you go into the thinner materials now, they've got the 2 mil, and then
You mean wallpaper?
yeah, bingo. And then of course when you're leaving the tile standards, how are you guys dealing with? TCM is so good about giving us dictates for things.
Yeah.
And then if you go outside of that, it's like, I mean, coming from the tile world, it's like nobody has anything other than the manufacturers.
Yeah, so it's no man's land with a lot of this stuff. We're still in the development stages of a lot of different things. When it comes to porcelain, I mean,
How are you dealing with liability is my question. So
it's a furniture piece. It's a furniture piece. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a furniture piece. And I would say in any business, have a good lawyer, have them look over things and have them look at definitions of things. But when I sell a vanity top made out of something thinner than 12mm, I call it a furniture piece. And that I'm not offering legal advice, but if you call it furniture piece, talk to a lawyer. It's different. So, but that's the legality. That how do you get behind something? How do you build something? You have failures. You learn. I cladded my personal cabinets at home in my house, and the wood warped and cracked panels. So we came up with another way that we do it. We use a thinner material. We don't use 6mm anymore. Those thinner materials, like a 3 or a 2, will move a little bit. It has that mesh.
Yeah, like I would say too, there's now a movement towards slabs that are being backed with like foam. And if you read into some of their paperwork that they have for the actual, what's the word I'm looking for? Not trademark, but their patents, that it's actually an idea that is pushing towards more of the transport side of endurance. It doesn't really add much value for impact per se, but it's helping folks to get into porcelain. And that's all I really want to see, is more people getting into porcelain, which drives the interest level, which means there's more people talking about it, which means I potentially get more calls. So the more of you in the room that start selling porcelain, the better for both Adam and I. Yeah, ma'am, we'll get you one more time.
Foam board, do you have a recommendation of the best foam board and any that can be fabricated wet?
Yeah, there's foam boards out there. When you want to fabricate wet, I'd lean towards an XPS board, and that's going to be boards that are XPS cementitious coated. Stay away from some of the fabric covered boards. Water may have an effect if you're cutting it. I know guys out there cutting foam board on water jets, and they'll cut others over, like I want to cut a cementitious coated one or go board over this one because they're worried about what could happen. So when you're wet cutting foam board, we cut a lot of stuff on, a table saw, just because.
And there's also aluminum honeycomb. That's an expensive option. I think in the right situation, it's a great way to go. But I've also heard from areas of the Southwest and down in Texas that some of the early adopters, when they did not assemble it properly, they're now getting heavy warranty claims from it popping because it's so rigid, it has no impact absorption. So that's something to kind of think about as you're doing your cost analysis. But for a big tabletop, it would be a cool option for anything that's overhanging. But you'll see a lot of brands out there, but I'm always looking for what's the most rigid type of substrate board for us. And I saw a hand in the back too. Yes, ma'am.
So what is the recommended thickness of these porcelain slabs right now? Because remember when just regular slabs was 3/4 inch, and they figured out 1 1/4 was better because things were cracking. So
Application based. So really, it's from our standpoint anyway, it's where you're going to be installing it would help dictate for us which way we want to recommend.
It's going to be installation based, but I'm going to tell you, all porcelain is not created equal, right? So there's some porcelain that has more recycled materials in it. They value engineered the manufacturing process. So and you'll learn. And some manufacturers, everybody's trying to make the most dollar. So that's a learning curve that you have to learn, and they constantly change those formulas. I had a personal failure in my own house, and the manufacturer said, yeah, we changed the formula, here's 4 more slabs. So it was one of those things like, oh, here's 4 more slabs, now I got to remake my whole island. So you never know sometimes what you're getting, and that's going back to his point of forming that relationship with your suppliers and good manufacturers. And they're going to lead you to the water, like with their porcelain. They're going to help you in any way they can.
Well, I'm going to wrap it up because I know that we are getting kicked off the stage here in a moment, but I will say, since one of my favorite vendors is here, if I were doing a floor or a wall installation, 6mm stone peak, awesome. If I wanted to do a kitchen countertop, 12mm from their sister company, Sapien Stone. So countertops, you can hit or miss, like a vanity, no problem, do 6, as long as it's built correctly. But with that, again, thank you very much for coming in early this morning. Enjoy coverings, everybody. Have a good one.